Welcome to Building the Board, presented by Hyper Ice. I'm Britt Johnson. Last season, the Dallas Cowboys led the NFL in interceptions with 26. Obviously, we know Trayvon Diggs led the way with 11. Most of those interceptions in general did come from the cornerbacks on this Dallas team that will all be returning this season. I'm going to bring in Kyle Yeomans to talk about these cornerbacks and the potential of possibly getting one in the first round. Any first-round guys you're interested in, or do the Cowboys have a need for one?
Yeah, see, that's the biggest thing is the fact that we're talking about draft day coming up, and the cornerbacks that are first-round, second-round guys aren't necessarily targets because the Cowboys bringing guys back. Trayvon Diggs helping lead the league in interceptions as a unit and as an individual with his double-digit picks this past year. You bring back guys like Anthony Brown, Jordan Lewis, and then Kelvin Joseph, who you spent a second-round pick on last year out of Kentucky. You're hoping he takes that second step. But the top guys pretty much are out of reach at the moment. Top 10 cornerbacks like an Ahmad Sauce Gardner out of Cincinnati or a Derek Stingley Jr. out of LSU, both very athletic, impact players, kind of in the same conversation we had last year with J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain. That's really that 1-2 punch up at the top of the cornerback class. And then you see a dip. 24 is kind of an odd place for it because there's guys like Kaiir Elam out of Florida. There's Andrew Booth Jr. out of Clemson that are both prospects that are worthy to be taken at 24. It's just whether or not the Cowboys really want to spend a high draft pick on a cornerback spot when there are so many other needs along the way. Now, if you don't have confidence in Kelvin Joseph, if you want to solidify that other cornerback spot opposite of Trayvon Diggs, the Cowboys could certainly go out and do so with some of those prospects that I mentioned. But right now, cornerback, secondary in general, just isn't a need for the Cowboys, and it is so fresh to be thinking of it that way.
It feels good, doesn't it?
So good to say, hey, we can talk about other spots because the Cowboys have done well at finding starters at that position.
And retaining the guys that they do have, like getting Jordan Lewis back, getting Anthony Brown as well. So let's go then to maybe late day 2, day 3 guys. What guys do you think the Cowboys could possibly pick up then?
Yeah, that's really where you start to see some of those guys that fit. I mean, one of the names up here, Kobe Bryant. I know we'll talk about him a little bit later on. Dave's going to break down Tariq Woolen. And there's other names along the way, maybe some of these guys that have played in the SEC and had some of those extra experience. You saw how the Cowboys have spent day 2 picks on SEC corners each of the last few years with Trayvon Diggs and Kelvin Joseph. There's plenty of talent in a deep cornerback class. It's just whether or not the Cowboys have somebody that feel like they can fit into Dan Quinn's system and utilize in that regard as a high pick.
Now, I know everybody thought they heard crazy. Kobe Bryant, yes.
Yeah.
He played, he actually changed his number during the semi-playoffs to Kobe Bryant, the legendary Kobe Bryant, to honor him. Let's talk about him. Does he have a little bit of Mamba mentality that could be added to this Dallas Cowboys team?
He does. He was one of the leaders on that Cincinnati Bearcats defense, and he's got a little bit of a lack in his game in terms of the athleticism. He's not the most athletic corner you're ever going to see, but he has that leadership mentality, the football IQ. He knows where to be in the right spot at the right time. And like you said, he changed from number 7 to number 8 during the college football semifinal, honoring Kobe Bryant, his namesake, and he plays with a little bit of that mentality. Really nice guy. We got a chance to catch up with him both at the Combine and at the Senior Bowl. He says he would love the opportunity to play for the Cowboys, and maybe that comes in the way of Dan Quinn seeing that maybe he is a fit there.
Maybe. Well, there's another guy that might want to come back here because he is a Texas native. Dave, who you got for us?
Sometimes you just zero in on a draft prospect because of the coaches on the team, and that is exactly what has happened in the case of Tariq Woolen. Fort Worth native, like Britt said, UTSA Roadrunner. I'm sure some of y'all in Texas will be interested by that. What interests me, with all due respect, is he's every bit of 6'4", 205. My man's got 35-inch arms. And if you think back to Dan Quinn drafting Nashawn Wright and Israel Mukwamu just last year, it's easy to imagine just trying to put together the tallest, longest secondary, maybe in NFL history. The guy can play, though. It's more than just being tall, I promise you. Let's go to the tape. UTSA, a lot of zone coverage here. Not going to see clips of Tariq Woolen running stride for stride. I promise you he can. The dude runs a 4.2. Again, I don't think it's a coincidence they called him Tariq the Freak when he was at UTSA. You'll see him down here, number 3. Hard to miss with those long legs, my gosh. Recognizing play, it's simple curl route, but I do appreciate he catches a lot of flack for an unwillingness to tackle. I don't know if I buy it. That's a pretty hefty guy right there over the middle of the field that he comes in and lays the wood on. I think he's willing to mix it up, which honestly, it was a criticism of Nahshon Wright. I didn't see that at all. I think these big, long guys are ready to mix it up. Now, you will see him up here. Again, a lot of zone coverage. I would love nothing more than to show you Tariq Woolen taking off down the field. Instead, I'm impressed by his recognition. Look how deep he drops. Recognizes the man in the flat. He's not even worried about the receiver taking off. He's got help over the top. Instead, he just streaks in 4.2 speed, making a very nice play on the running back. Now, don't get me wrong. He's raw. He's a transitioned receiver. He's only been doing this for a couple of years. I think you're talking about a project guy. This is not a plug and play. But like y'all mentioned, the Cowboys don't need plug and play cornerbacks. They drafted 2 last year, and that's to go with the 3 veterans that all had really great seasons. This would be a developmental player, but like you said, Kyle, shocking to say, the Cowboys could afford to do that if they wanted to.
Well, and what do you talk about with these mid-round picks? You talk about projection, you talk about traits, and it's hard to find a guy who's 6'4", as long and lanky and as really as polished as he is, even as raw, and he runs a 4.26 40. The guy's pretty, I mean, he's a freak, Reek the Freak. That's why they called him that. Like Dave said a moment ago, UTSA was lucky to have him there because they recruited him as a wide receiver. If he would have been recruited as a cornerback a little bit early on, I don't think he's at UTSA. I think he's in the Big Ten, in the Big 12, in the SEC, and we're talking a little bit more about him being a day 1, day 2 guy instead of being maybe a mid-round pick.
Well, I'm like your typical average Dallas Cowboys fan. I'm not convinced, okay? I need you guys to break down for me a case as to why the Cowboys should draft a cornerback, because again, we mentioned that heavy cornerback class that we have with the Cowboys already. We already have a ton of guys. Yeah. They're already great, leading the league in interceptions. What more do you want?
Okay, I've got you here. How about this? You've got, let's talk about Trayvon Diggs. Yes, he was phenomenal. Yes, he is the cornerstone of your secondary over the next couple of years. However, what is after that? You've had some ups and downs with both.
Gave up 1,000
Anthony
yards.
Brown. You've had both. You have Jordan Lewis that's in that conversation as well. Neither one of those guys really make you excited about the cornerback position. Yes, they are very adequate starters. They do things the right way for that Dan Quinn defense. However, they're not necessarily cornerstones. Kelvin Joseph was drafted to maybe be a cornerstone opposite of Trayvon Diggs. What did he show you? He hasn't necessarily shown you a whole lot. He did battle through injuries. They're hoping he takes that next step. But if he doesn't, all of a sudden you're not excited about the 2 veterans you have on the roster and about the guy you spent a second-round pick on in 2021. I don't think it's out of the question that a cornerback could be taken, but it is certainly on the back burner compared to some of the other needs.
I've been watching your face, Dave. What you got?
I'm so tired of people talking about Jordan Lewis and Anthony Brown like they're bad players, and that's not directed at you, Kyle. That is the Cowboys fan base in general. I think they're above average starters. They both had fantastic years. Yes, AB, Thanksgiving against the Raiders, he'd probably like to have back. The other 17 games of the season.
Tampa Bay week 1 was a little rough.
Oh, no, the season opener. I mean, like Anthony Brown
defending Super Bowl champ.
had a nice season. Jordan Lewis is under contract for 2 more years. The big thing for me is, depending on how highly you draft a corner, you're getting in the way of Kelvin Joseph and Nahshon Wright. You liked these guys enough to make them top 100 picks last year. Sure, if a Derek Stingley falls into your lap, Sauce Gardner won't, but if he did, I get it. You just take the freak player as he comes to you. But if you're drafting a guy with lesser talent or a 2nd or 3rd round pick, what are you saying about the guys you just spent top 100 picks on?
You're giving up on them.
You're giving up on them because you're putting somebody in front of them. Look, day 3, all bets are off. Just draft the player you like the most. But when we're talking about the big money picks, rounds 1 through 4, the guys that you expect to contribute as rookies, I don't think you need it right now unless something really freaky happens.
For the record, I agree with Dave a little bit more than what I said. However, you asked the question.
I made a hell of a point.
You said build a case on why the Cowboys could draft a cornerback. So that's what I said. But I agree with Dave. They don't need to draft one. And that's what is so great about this draft. It's so refreshing.
It's weird to say.
And safety's in that conversation too. I know there's a whole nother safety segment of building the board that we're going to talk about as well. However, just the fact that you're not necessarily pigeonholed into a cornerback, even as you were a year ago, it feels great. And that's a credit to Dan Quinn. That's a credit to this front office of finding guys for that secondary, and they've done that the last couple of years.
All right, Cowboys Nation, we feeling good over here on cornerbacks. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Building the Board. I'm Britt Johnson, Kyle Yeomans, Dave Hellman. We'll see you soon.